Hello there, people of the internet. A popular saying that I hear, hold on, before we do that, this is not an old video. I just so happen to be out here at the old gun range. I'm visiting family. We still own this range. I just wasn't expecting to do filming while I was up here, so I don't really have all that much, but I do have a couple of things. And I am alone with free time, so hey, why not do some filming? So this right here is my Mosin Nagant. One thing I hear a lot of people say is, if that rifle could talk. And what they mean is that there's a lot of history behind a gun like this. The things it's seen, the things it's done. Like, there's a lot of things that this rifle could tell you that it's seen and done if it could talk. This particular Mosin, we have some burn damage on it right here. We have some shrapnel damage on it right here. We got just a couple of things on this Mosin that leads me to think that it has seen some unfortunate circumstances. And in the events of something like that, I'd like for this rifle to tell me what it has seen, what its story behind those things are. Unfortunately, the rifle cannot talk. Now, there's some stuff out there, maybe it just sat in a warehouse. Like, for example, a lot of your Swiss rifles are in really, really good condition because they never really saw any real significant conflicts. So the stories that those rifles have to tell might actually come after they have been surplus. Like, for example, this Mosin right here. God knows what it's seen, like, before I got my hands on it, because it's a Russian refurbishment, probably sat in a warehouse for a very long time, and then the Russians surplused it onto the US market, and I bought it right out of that surplus. So who knows what it's seen? I'm betting a few decades of warehouse storage. But I do know what it has seen after I bought it. So there are stories and histories behind these guns that are more and beyond just the military service that they have seen. Like, for example, this right here is set up in its original military configuration. But back in like the 40s and 50s, a lot of people would get these old bolt-action rifles and they would sporterize them. And they would essentially use them for hunting and gathering and sustainment and whatever it is that they were having to use a rifle for, because they needed to do so to survive. And there were generations where people were doing that with one single rifle. Like, for example, I actually have a buddy of mine. He doesn't live too terribly far away. Maybe I'll make a video about it someday. He has himself a 30-40 Krag that has been sporterized, but it's been in the family for like generations, and the rifle has traveled all over the country here in the United States on various kinds of hunting trips. He's got photos and videos and all sorts of stuff on just how many things that rifle has taken. 30-40 Krag, how do you like that? But that 30-40 Krag in military service, yeah, I'm sure that it has seen quite a bit. But then we have literal generations of that rifle serving as a hunting rifle for sustainment purposes with this family. And there's a lot of these military surplus rifles that ended up going to families to serve as their primary arm for whatever it is that they need a rifle to do. If they're on a ranch, or if they're needing to hunt for meat, or if they are on a frontier somewhere, I mean, who the hell knows? It sounds like we got some bugs coming out. Nothing I can do about that. Hopefully they quiet down before too terribly long. But a lot of people just kind of ignore the history of these rifles beyond just their military service. As a matter of fact, a lot of people kind of like look down and disregard, say, sporterized rifles. They're like, oh, it's been sporterized. I want absolutely nothing to do with it. I'm not interested. Despite the fact that it was done, I don't know, 80 years ago. Now, if it's a modern sporterization thing, I'd say punch the guy in the face. But if it's something that was done 80 years ago by somebody who needed a good practical tool to be able to do a job to keep him and his family alive, there's a lot of history behind some of those rifles. Like, for example, that 30-40 Krag. That thing's been all over the country. It's taken countless just deer and elk and boar and moose. I mean, he has done a lot of stuff with that rifle. I'm not an expert on that particular rifle. I don't 110% know everything that was done with it, but I've seen a lot of the photos and I've heard a lot of the stories about not just him, but his father and his grandfather, and I think his great-grandfather as well. This is just one of those rifles that's been in the family literally forever. and it's still being used to this day for hunting purposes. That's a lot of story and history behind that rifle, like a far longer time than what that rifle would have seen in military service. And let's bump back to, say, the adoption of the 1903 Springfield. After that, these 30-40 Krags would have been surplused and out on the market. Who knows what kind of people on the frontier would have seen and done and used these rifles for. That goes way beyond just their military service. Or even something like this Mosin. Somebody back in the 40s or 50s, if they get their hands on something like a Mosin, probably not that many of them floating around the U.S. at that particular time. It'd probably be something more like a Sporterized Mauser, or say a Sporterized 1903, some kind of leftover war surplus that was brought back into the country. Maybe in Arasaka, I know that there were a bunch of those lazing around that got Sporterized. They take those, and that rifle turns into Grandpa's hunting rifle, which turns into Great-Grandpa's hunting rifle. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate you, buddy. And it turns into, like, the family heirloom. Like, don't discourage the history of a rifle just because it's been sporterized, because that sporterization is a history of the rifle. I definitely prefer my rifles in their original military configuration, as a lot of people do. But like, so many people just decide to completely ignore the stories that come after a rifle's military service. Like this Mosin right here, people pay attention to its history all the way up until 1945. And then despite the fact that this rifle was probably continuing to be carried and used and God knows what it's seen after 1945, nobody cares about that. Just because they have this ideology of their favorite thing to focus on in terms of the history of a rifle, and they just completely ignore essentially the rest of the history of the rifle, because there's a lot of history behind these rifles that goes way beyond just some soldier using it in the field. Like, this is the gun that I had growing up, and I shot so much ammo through it. I have seen this rifle do a lot, especially with those big old 440 spam cans of ammunition. This rifle has been through the ringer. That's for sure. There's a lot of history behind this old gun, just from it being in my hands, and God knows what it's going to see in the future, especially as I start passing it down from generation to generation. Let me center around here. Did that quiet down the bugs? I can't hear it. Yeah, that seemed to have quieted down the bugs. Hell yeah. I've also got, like, look at non-military guns. I've got a Stevens 410 shotgun, single shot, that belonged to my great-great-grandfather, who, like, passed it down through generations. Lots of history behind that rifle, or that shotgun. Lots of stories to tell. One thing that I don't understand is that if... Ooh, that was a little low. I'm going to bring this up a little bit. For some reason, this Mosin hits real low with this pull ammo stuff. For some reason, people will look at a Sporterized military surplus gun and they'll be like, bah, I want nothing to do with that. But if they look at, say, a Remington 700 that's set up with a scope and a short stock and something like that, and it was, I don't know, great-grandfather's hunting rifle, and there's a bunch of stories of him and grandfather and father and son taking it out and using it for practical purposes and hunting with it all over whatever country it is that they're in, or even other places. Like, for some reason, that history they adore with that rifle because it doesn't have that military provenance. But if it's a military rifle that's been sporterized, so many people just completely dismiss them. Okay. Ow. So yes, if this rifle could talk, I bet that it could tell an abundance of stories, but I'm also betting that some of the stories it would have to tell would be after the war, because there's a lot that has happened with this rifle, especially in my hands, that are way, way beyond it fighting in some war. So, thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next episode. I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.